I'm organizing my artifacts today and I got my turtle shells out. I've got some boxes of legally obtained natural artifacts that I bring to talks, like to school children and scouting groups and campgrounds and that type of thing. Things like furs, mounts, feathers, and shells. And I'd like to show them to you today. This is the one that I've got in the worst shape, and you can see that it's a bone. It's not shiny, it doesn't have the coloration of the turtles and tortoises that you usually see. This one has been around the block. It's a little old. This one was found out in the woods. Everything's been rotted away. This is only the carapace, not the plastron, which is the bottom. There's the carapace, the plastron, and then the bridge that connects the two, and this is only the carapace. You can see the light through it. You can see the individual scutes, or shields. I like to call them scutes or scutes. Pieces of bone fused together, I like to liken them to a fingernail. You know, the living tissue on the outside of your fingernails. That's how these grow. And aquatic turtles, they'll shed the keratin off of these, and terrestrial turtles don't. If you flip this over, this is really cute. Look at that. You can see that the turtle's spine is fused to the underside of that shell. You can also see the pelvic girdle and the shoulder girdle. One of the really cool things about genetics that I think are the genes that code for your limbs. We first start talking about genetics in like real broad strokes and trying to teach people what genes do. We think about like the obvious ones and Punnett squares and crossing individuals, evolution, not as individuals, but as a population. But I really got into it deep when I talked about it at the molecular level. Molecular genetics is just because the same genes that code for you to grow arms and legs and a head out of your trunk are the same genes that code for the turtle to grow arms and legs and a head out of a central trunk. That's why we're so related to everything else that's got 4 limbs. So this is the first evidence to groups that turtles cannot leave their shells. Most turtles can, and chelonians, turtles and tortoises. When I say turtles in this video, for all intents and purposes, I mean like doop-a-doop-doops. Little reptile dudes with a shell. Sea turtles cannot pull their head in to protect themselves. And no turtle can leave their shell. The shell is a part of them. The shell is actually bone. And it used to be theorized that a shell developed as, like there was a keratinized hardening on these reptiles and they fused together and then fused with the bone. But there's more evidence lately of widened ribs, and the plastron being the first thing that was adapted. Turtles predate dinosaurs, and back in the day, they were these reptiles that lived on land, and eventually their rib bones, so they had ribs just like we do, the rib bones, generation after generation, started to widen as points of attachment for muscles. So they had these enormous pectoral muscles that allowed them to dig and swim, and that's what allowed the turtles to move into the oceans, which is the main reason why this line that predates dinosaurs survived the KT extinction event. Triassic extinction event, because it was at that time that oxygen levels in the atmosphere were very low and the oceans turned acidic. The only things that survived were things on a smaller scale. When we think about ancient animals, they're huge. They're bigger than cars. They're as big as some buildings. The only things that could survive those harsh conditions are animals with a smaller body size, with smaller metabolic demands and slower metabolic demands. And when you think about animals with slow metabolisms, turtles are one of the first ones that come to mind because they have remained unchanged for like 200 million years. Turtle shells are adapted vertebrae and ribs. And of course, they've still got their arms and legs that hang out the holes. This one still got the plastron and the bridge to it, so you can see where the back half of the animal hangs out of the front half, but the whole thing is a living part of the animal. I don't know who to credit the making of this graphic to that I found online, but I love it so much and it haunts my dreams, and it's such a very nice analog for like how a turtle is actually made. There are nerve endings in the bone, so turtles can feel when you touch them. They also metabolize sunlight, just like most other reptiles, through their shell. So if their shell gets completely painted, they can no longer absorb the sunlight they need for the nutrients their body requires. So don't ever paint a turtle shell and don't ever drill through a turtle shell. Can a turtle feel when their shell is broken? Absolutely. When I give my talks and I get to the turtle part, I bring out this one, which shows the bone and how the bones are still in there, fused. Then I'll bring out this one that has the keratin sloughing off of it. It isn't quite as old, it's not quite as decayed, and it's not as far gone. It also shows the hinged plastron of a box turtle. They can suck in and then shut their little plastron up and be protected. Still some bones inside of this. You can hear it shaking, so I try to be real delicate with this. It's falling apart, but it demonstrates all the different layers and parts of a turtle shell. Specifically, the colored keratinized layer over the bone. And then this little one that's in the best shape of all. It still has some soft tissue in it, although kind of mummified. Got a bit of the skin left. The little tail sticking out the back, which is just an extension of the vertebrae. So we go from just the turtle shell with the bone, and the keratinized layer above it, to the turtle shell with all of its coloration, keratinized layer along with some of the soft tissue, to an absolute specimen of a living, breathing chelonian. And a handsome one at that, I might add. This is my sulcata tortoise Fuzzy, and I've had him for over 20 years. He comes with me to talk sometimes. I try to arrive early enough that I can stick him out where he's going to kind of wander into the woods or where people can't see him, and I'll go through all the different turtle shells and then show him or her. Funny story, I don't know what bits this thing has. I know there are going to be some turtle experts coming in here. Oh, that's definitely a male because of the domed carapace. They tend to be flattened on the bottom if they're male for, you know, mating purposes. Or they're going to say it's a female. I'm telling you, the experts at Cornell University in upstate New York couldn't tell me if this was a male or a female after X-ray and MRI. But like by the same token, if I wind up on Turtle Talk and there is somebody who could definitively tell me male or female on this thing, if I could dig up the MRIs, I'd be tickled. Not like it matters at all. I love my tortoise for who they are. This tortoise is native to the desert, which might be apparent through his coloration. Ravenous eaters, and they burrow when it gets cold. He hasn't had a treat in a while. Let's go get him a treat. I'd also kind of like to mention that I was 19 when I thought it was a good idea to get one of these guys. They've got no business in north central Pennsylvania, but here we are and I'm doing the best I can with him. He lives in his own little apartment with his own little baseboard heat in the wintertime. I've read that their kidneys are so efficient at pulling moisture from the dry desert grasses that they're used to that you can actually damage their kidneys by freely offering water. Depending on the moisture of the substrate that they're in and how much moisture they're getting from their food, you kind of have to monitor that and be careful with it. They also can't swim, so the kiddie pool's not for him. That's his kiddie pool. I soak him in that one. That's for the kitties. The kitties. Sulcata tortoises do best on dry leafy greens and haze and grasses, a few vegetables, and rarely a treat. I don't know anything formally about their vision, but I do know when he was a baby, I had these tiny little tortoise pellets, and they were like fruity pebbles, all different colors, and I would put them in front of him, and when I came back, only the red and yellow ones and orange ones were missing. He would eat the blue and green later, which is weird. Just kind of funny and cute, but it leads me to believe he's got color vision and would prefer something that looks ripe and sweet over, a green grass or leaf. Don't be scared. You got it figured out. Just for the record, I advise against anyone getting one of these. I was a teenager and I was in love with turtles. I mean, they were my totem. They still are. I really wanted one and they're slow growing. And by the time I'm 25, I'll have a house of my own for this thing, right? Long story short, it has been a lot of work to keep this thing in my life. Mixed with a little bit of luck and support system that I've got. I try to take fairly good care of him, but he does not get the care that he should. I'm busy with a family and a business now, and I live up in the north. Our winters get really cold. We lose power. Kind of have no business with this tortoise, if I'm being honest. There's so many of these guys in rescues already that I don't know if he'd be any better off going to somebody else. We know about hoarders. So I do the best that I can with him and try to use him to teach other people about tortoises too. By the way, tortoises and turtles is all about semantics, and it depends who you ask. If you're asking me, and I've kind of rabbit-holed this, but not for a few years, the only difference between turtle and tortoise is who you are and where you come from. Kind of like tomato, is it a fruit or a vegetable? Well, it's 100% a fruit, speaking botanically. But as someone who loves to cook in the kitchen myself, if I say, bring me a fruit, any fruit, I just want to make something with it, I'm thinking dessert, I'm not thinking tomato paste. So culinarily speaking, I would say tomato is absolutely a vegetable. Kind of the same with turtle and tortoise. Some people will say that anything that is terrestrial is a tortoise and everything that lives in the water is a turtle. There's another country somewhere that if it is not a green sea turtle, it's a tortoise. In another region, there's another rule. That's the problem with common names. If there's not a standardization, people can argue over it. So when I was saying chelonian, that's my favorite word. Remember, if that's the order of turtles and tortoises, that sounds about right. Chelonians are any of those reptilian type critters that got 4 legs and walk around with a hard shell around them. As always, correct me if I'm wrong, add your favorite bits in the comments that I may have missed, and be kind to the turtles.